All right, y'all. So today we're going to be looking at solving equations in vertex form. Just to give you a heads up as to what solving equations means, what we're doing is we're solving for these intersections, okay? And so there's a possibility actually for, an equation not to have a solution. Right? This means it has two solutions. It's crossing, the quadratic is crossing the x-axis twice. It's also possible for it to do something like this, where it only crosses once. And if you're wondering if it's possible for it to cross 0 times, absolutely. This graph doesn't even cross the x-axis. So it wouldn't have solutions, meaning there's no x value that can make the equation equal to 0. Now, if you're wondering if it's possible for it to cross 3 times, no. A quadratic can only cross a maximum of 2 times. Okay? So suppose we have the equation y equals x squared plus, let's see, I'm legitimately just thinking of a question in my head. 10x plus 24. So remember, the first thing is we want to think about what do we have to add to complete the square, right? So we look at 10x, half of 10 is 5, 5 times 5 is 25, so we need to add 25 to complete the square. Now if we add 25, we also have to subtract 25. This portion right here, right, from the last videos we've been practicing, we know that's a perfect square, so that's just going to be x plus 5 times x plus 5, or just x plus 5 squared. And then a positive 24 and a negative 25 is equal to negative 1. So now we have our standard equation in vertex form. Let me just rewrite that again. X plus 5 squared minus 1. What we want to do now is we want to solve this equation. And solving the equation means y is equal to 0, okay? Y is equal to 0. So we're going to have 0 is equal to x plus 5 squared minus 1. And now we're solving this equation normally. We're going to add 1 to both sides. 1 is equal to x plus 5 squared. We're going to take the square root of both sides. We're going to get x plus 5 is equal to, since we're taking a square, the square root of a square, we actually get plus or minus 1 here, okay? So I should probably mute my Discord. So we have two equations, x plus 5 equals positive 1, and x plus 5 equals negative 1. Here we subtract 5 from both sides, and we get x equals negative 4. Here we subtract 5 from both sides, and we get x equals negative 6. So the two solutions to this equation, right, the two places where the quadratic crosses on the x-axis are at negative 4 and at negative 6. Right, these are the two values that make the equation 0. Now, if you're wondering right now, right, this is how you would solve it using, if you have a quadratic in vertex form, that's how you would solve it. You would essentially move the constant over, in this case it's the negative 1 over to the left, and then you would take the square root and then subtract by whatever it is that you're adding by x. But if you look at the original equation, x squared plus 10x plus 24, this equation is actually factorable. There are two numbers that you can multiply to get to 24 and add to 10. Those two numbers are 6 and 4. And then, right, if we were to use a zero product, sorry, I didn't talk about that. If you were to set this to 0, you would have x plus 6 equals 0 and x plus 4 equals 0, which would give you x equals -6 and -4, which is exactly the same values that we got down here. So we're solving this 2 different ways and getting the same answers. So a question you might be thinking about is there an easy way to solve these without necessarily having to complete the square? And absolutely. If you can factor, factor. That's the easiest way you could do. If you can't factor, complete the square. Completing the square will always work, but sometimes it might run you into decimals. Now let's try one where you're only going to have one solution, okay? Y equals x squared plus 6x plus 9. Remember, this quadratic had 2 solutions. X squared plus 6x plus 9. I know that's a perfect square because half of 6 is 3 and 3 times 3 is 9. So this becomes y equals x plus 3 squared. Now if you're trying to solve this equation, you're going to have 0 is equal to x plus 3 squared. You're going to take the square root of both sides. The square root of 0 is 0, x plus 3. Now you might be wondering, isn't that going to be plus or minus 0? Yes, but plus or minus 0 is the same thing as 0. And we're going to subtract 3 here, and you get x is equal to -3, which means one solution. So this is an example of this graph, where it only crosses once. In fact, it doesn't even cross, it touches the x-axis. Now I'm going to give you an example of a quadratic, and let me just, I'm legitimately trying to think of I can't think of a quadratic in standard form that has no solution, but I will give you a quadratic in vertex form that has no solution. Okay, let's just do something like 2 times x minus 3 squared plus 4. Actually, let's get rid of this 2 just to make it easier for ourselves. So right now, this is telling us that the vertex is at 3, 4. And it's a positive parabola, right? Because there's a positive 1 in there. So the vertex is sort of like right here, 3, 4. And it's going up. So visually, you can see this parabola does not cross the x-axis. So in theory, we should not be able to solve this equation. And let's see what happens. So we set this equation equal to 0. X minus 3 squared plus 4. We're going to subtract 4 from both sides. So now we have -4 is equal to x minus 3 squared. And then here, this is where we run into issues. We got x minus 3 on the right, but we have plus or minus the square root of -4. Now, right now, I want you to go into your calculators and type in -4, and then try taking the square root. It should give you something like error or syntax error. And that's because, at least, before you get to Algebra 2, we always tell people you can't take the square root of a negative number. Because if you think about it, right, I think we've done this in class before. What number, right? Remember, square roots mean what number times itself equals -4. What number times itself equals -4? It can't be 2 because 2 times 2 is 4. It can't be -2 because -2 times -2 is +4. So what number times itself equals a negative? For now, we say there is no possible answer. So because of this, we can't take the square root of a negative number, which means not solvable, which implies no solutions, which means does not cross the x-axis. And sure enough, when you look at the graph, it does not cross the x-axis. For now. Anywho, please enjoy this video. This is how you solve quadratics using